He took his fear and folded it into a rose and put it in his palm. And she took it from her palm and put it in her hair. And I mean, that's what we should be about. We should be about love and understanding. My name is Lars Prip, and I was born in October of 1947. And I was born in Holbæk, Denmark. My parents immigrated to the United States and settled in Grays Lake, and that's basically where we enlisted from.
What was your brother's name?
Sorn. At the time, we flew Icelandic Airline, and Icelandic Airline was a fledgling airline that was using old military equipment. So they got a hold of 3 or 4 old C-54 Skymasters, and they converted them into, these were transport aircrafts that were used during the Second World War, and they transported them in to haul passengers to the United States. When it did arrive, we took off for Oslo, and then we took off for Iceland. In Iceland, and we took off, headed out for Newfoundland. That's when we lost the number 4 engine. I don't remember as a child whether the engine actually felt off, but I'll tell you what, it was one hell of a ride down towards the Atlantic. We all thought we were going to crash, okay? But the pilots were able to pull the plane back up again, and we returned to Iceland, where we awaited, it must have been a week. We waited for a spare engine to come in from Frankfurt at the time. And it was kind of exciting for us because we had the pilots knew that they had 3 small Danish kids on this airplane, and they kind of all befriended us, and we got to see the cockpit, we got them see changing the engine out, and it was actually very exciting for us. And then, of course, after they got the plane fixed, well, then we flew on to New York, where we caught a TWA Constellation. They were called Connies. We were met by relatives who took us up to Grays Lake. Grays Lake High School in Grays Lake, Lakeview. It's on Lake Street in Grays Lake. I think at the time I knew 3 English words: shut up and beautiful. And the shut up part got me in trouble a lot because I tried it out on my teachers. See, you got to understand, I was 10 years old when I was in 1st grade. They put us into 1st grade because we didn't understand English at the time. It would have been better suited everybody if they would just have put us into where we were being. We could learn as we went along. But it was very traumatic for us. And there was I'm sure you understand that kids can be very cruel to each other, especially if they don't know the language or they fit into the environment. There was a lot of fights. There was a lot of bullies waiting for us at the end of school, and they would pounce on us. And my son, my twin brother, was the only one who really stood up and fought back for the 2 of us, or for the other 2 of us. And there was a lot of fallout, you know, interaction between children and whatever. And we just decided that we'd had enough of the bullying and picking on, and my twin brother decided on the Marines, and I just followed right along with him, and we both enlisted. Where we signed up in January of '67, and when we graduated from high school, we went right off to boot camp. we knew somewhat what the Marine Corps boot camp was going to be like, and we kind of figured that we didn't want to have identical twins in the same in the same company here or in the same platoon, because the drill instructors would just literally have a field day with us. Okay, so Sorn went 2 weeks before I did, and I followed 2 weeks afterwards, but they still found out about us, okay? And they just, I can't even begin to tell you how uncomfortable they make life for you in the Marine Corps. It's a tradition. I was stationed down at Cherry Point, North Carolina. I was an aircraft mechanic, F-4 Phantoms, with the Marine aircraft wing down there, and I was trained as an aircraft mechanic that handled ejection seats and pressurization systems. I was down at Cherry Point, and I received a phone call from my mother, and I did not believe the phone call. As soon as I heard it, I slammed down the phone and said, "This can't be it." And then they called back, and yeah, that was what was going on, and I had to find a way to get back to Illinois again. My brother was a grunt, an 0311. He was an infantryman, and he was with Mike 39, Mike Company, 3rd Battalion, 9th Marines, and he was up at places like Kamlo. He was at Quang Tri. He was on Marble Mountain, the Razorback, Camp Carroll. He was running convoy duty down Route 1. And when he was killed, he was out on an operation that had tanks involved with it. And he had, from what we understand, he had walked over what's known as a spider trap, a hole in the ground where somebody shoots up at the incoming Marines in this case. And he was brought down that way. And it's kind of like, that's only part of the story. The other part of the story was he was crushed by a Marine Corps tank when he fell down. So, you know, when you drive by these war memorials out there, and you stand there and you look at what one of these tanks could do to a human body, it comes home really hard, you know. Our house in Grays Lake is situated in such a way that we never, ever used the front door, okay? We always used the side door, or we always went into the garage. My mother swore at the time that when she heard that he had been killed, that she heard the front door open. And somebody yelled up the staircase, "I'm home." So, and it wasn't me. Being that we were immigrants, and being that we went through this whole thing with learning a new culture and learning a new, I think that my parents were actually proud when we did join the Marines. How they feel now, well, you know, things change. And loss does a lot of damage to people. And that's what happened with my family. They split up, they broke up. So, and we don't talk about it.
The incredible scope of the Tet Offensive catches the Americans by surprise, but it doesn't take long before they begin to fight back. At the embassy in Saigon, military police and Marine guards begin clearing out the Viet Cong.
And I was still down in North Carolina at the time. And now, as a sense of history, what was going on in Vietnam at this time was that the American embassy had just gotten hit by Viet Cong sappers, and they blew a hole in the wall and gained access to the embassy compound. At that time, there was only a detachment strength of Marines doing the security work. So what they decided to do was to beef up the strength, increase the security detachment to a company strength, and then they brought a company of grunts down from I Corps to stand perimeter. The embassy in Saigon was a very big operation. They had the main building, which was called the White Elephant, and that was downtown, okay? And each of the agencies that was associated with the embassy, USAID, JustPow, CORDS, all of these agencies had their own outlying buildings.
This is now what is left of the American involvement in Vietnam. The U.S. embassy behind me has been completely looted. The South Vietnamese obviously are angry at the American withdrawal. Many of them have said that they were left out in the evacuation. They were unable to make the helicopters. Many of them were American employees. They have had to stay, and they will now have to stay and cope with communism in South Vietnam.
They were looking for volunteers to go to Saigon to man the new detachment or the new strength at the embassy. And I raised my hand, and 10 hours later I was bound on an aircraft towards Traverse Air Force Base in the land of Vietnam for revenge. I thought I could go over there and make a difference. You can't. The game, it is so much bigger than one person. It was like, I remember, one of the things I remember was getting off of the plane at Tan Son Nhut Air Base, and they opened up the door to the aircraft, and it was like getting a blast of hot air that I had never experienced in my life before. It was so intense, it almost knocked me back into the fuselage again of the aircraft. There was, downtown Saigon, it was like any suburban area. I mean, there were bars, and there was massage parlors, and you could basically get into whatever you wanted to get into. It was an open city. I wasn't like going to the library every day. You were constantly on alert, because we were always looking for people that were trying to gain access to the compound, okay? We weren't allowed to play radios. We weren't allowed to read or do anything else like that. It was a constant state of readiness and alert. We were always listening for noises and for whatever that could be a possible security threat to the compound. Ours was not a hostile situation where we would constantly be engaged in returning fire and this type of stuff. I think the whole time I was there, we only took fire maybe a half a dozen times, and that was for the compound, for a cemetery across the street. And it was more times than not, it was downright boring. However, during the during the daytime hours, we were constantly interacting with people trying to get access to the buildings, you know, visitors and whatever. And we were more talking to people and interacting type of thing, you know. One time we received rockets at incoming rockets at one of the posts. But I don't remember anything like what my brother would have been involved with. So, one of the jobs that I did was I was assigned to the JustPow, which is the Joint United States Public Information Office. And what reporters would do is they would come in and dump their stories, and they would sort through the pictures and whatever else. One of the things that we did as security people, we walked around during the nighttime making sure that everything was locked up and under key, you know. And there was horrendous pictures of battle casualties and atrocities that we saw doing this. That one night, there was two of us on guard duty, and the ARVNs, the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, South Vietnam, had a company of troopers who was trying to gain access to our building to look for Army deserters, which, I mean, there was two of us there, and they were going to come in. So we got basically getting ready for them and lock and loading. And luckily enough, the duty officer managed to show up on time to defuse the situation. But if he hadn't, I don't know whether I'd be sitting here talking about it, because we were going to open fire on him, that type of thing. And I did that for 6 months, and then after that, I went to Ambassador Bunker's compound. He was, Ellsworth Bunker was the ambassador in Saigon at the time, at the American Embassy in Saigon. So what I did for 6 months at the at Ambassador Bunker's compound was I did strictly physical security around the compound. So, and that was for 6 months. I was on the ambassador's, one of the guard towers on the ambassador's compound there, and there was movement coming over one of the walls, and the radios were down that night, okay? And I yelled out, "Dong Lai," to the person, "Stop, you know, halt." He was up on top of the wall, coming in over the wall. And I locked and loaded on the sucker, and it turns out to be one of our own guys that's coming back drunk from downtown, you know. And luckily, the Marine who was in front of on the guard tower on my right-hand side almost fell out of the guard tower screaming at me because he could identify him from his position, and I couldn't. So that was, well, that would have been bad. So, yeah. Marine Security Guard duty is a 2-year station. And I left and rotated to Tehran, Iran. And that would have been in November of 1970. So I went to Tehran for a 2-year posting. Now, the Marine Corps got this, they call them dream sheets. If you're at a hardship post, which Saigon was considered, then you could fill out this dream sheet and they would try to get you to the place that you want to go to, okay? And my first choice, I believe it was Copenhagen, and my second choice was Tel Aviv, okay? No openings in Copenhagen and no openings in Tel Aviv, so they sent me to Tehran, Iran. And that was when the Shah was there. That would have been in 1970, 1969. The Shah had just been, elected the year before that, or appointed the year before, maybe 2 years before that, if I remember right. Never met the man, but There he was, and Tehran was just like another another city. You know, they were making a transition towards the 20th century. They still wore the face masks and whatever, but a lot of English modern-day women would dress like they dress here in the United States. There wasn't a problem. So. I'll make a confession about that because it's something that I'm not very proud of.
War is now in Laos, Cambodia, it's all over Asia. There's a lot of liberal bullshit to say I want the Vietnam War to end. We want to get America out of all of Asia, all of Latin America.
When Kent State happened, I was sitting at a bar in Ankara, Turkey.
When the Jeep mission failed, Brigadier General Robert Canterbury ordered the troops to disperse the crowd.
I was with some other Marines from the embassy, and we heard about this. And I made a comment, I said to myself, well, I heard that the students had been gunned down, and I says, well, why the hell didn't they just shoot all of them? That comment I have regretted that comment ever since I made that, because I did not understand what was going on back in the States. I had been so brainwashed and so conditioned into believing that we were doing the right thing in Vietnam, and I would just continue that thought process. I was 22, 23 when I went through this experience. And to say that I liked it at the time would be very hard, because you got to understand I was grieving at the time. My twin brother had just been killed within that year. And it was very, very hard for me to handle this by myself. The Marine Corps is not known for their sensitivity. They could really give a shit less what you're going through. So I had to handle that grief and that loss on my own. And it was not easy for me. A lot of alcohol involved. And it just, so to say that I liked the experience, either of them, no, I did not. When you're by yourself and you see the light of daylight coming through and you haven't got a hangover, yeah, there's some conscience that bothers you. And that's why most of us at that time just stayed in a cloud of alcohol, or worse, drugs, or whatever they were doing. So I was a wreck. I should not have been where I was at because of my state. I shouldn't have been carrying around a weapon with me. And I shouldn't have been allowed access to all the alcohol I was being allowed to drink. Going through all of that loneliness, all of that exposure to alcohol, all of that grief, didn't really start straightening itself out until I met Patty. You know, it really, I got out of the Marines and I started looking more towards companionship and company. The alcoholism lasted for years after that, but I finally kicked that as well, so. My fondest memory with Patty was the day I met her. You see, I walked into a ready-made family. Lisa was our daughter was 5 years old. And I adopted her when she was 6. So it was like a ready-made family. What more could a guy ask for? a lonely guy. People, I spent 4.5 years chasing around the world looking for the girl to marry. And when I get back from overseas, she's across the street from my parents' house. You know, that's how we met. She was living across the street from where my parents lived. So, and that was 45 years ago, right, honey?
The Harlem Veteran Project is nothing else like at any school or any classroom for that matter. It is very difficult and challenging, but along the way you learn so much, and it isn't just premiere. You learn another person's story and their experiences with what they've been through and their struggles through life. This class is no easy task whatsoever, but it has given me the chance to see how hard I can work on a project and see it through until the end. Lars' story is very inspirational, and his experiences is something that I'll carry on through the rest of my life, and through what he's told me and the stories that he has given me has been something amazing. I'd just like to thank you, Lars, for the stories that you have told me and that you have given me, and the experiences is like nothing else that I've ever seen before.